So question 1, we have painter's total earnings from a job include a fixed amount plus an amount based on the number of hours worked. The values in the two tables represent the linear relationships between the number of hours worked and the painter's total earnings in dollars. So here we have two tables that describe the earnings of Joe and of Brandon, who are two painters. So these two tables that show the earnings of these two painters. The first question that we are trying to answer, question A, says that Joe and Brandon make different amounts of money for 0 hours worked, and asks why. And then in parentheses, it kind of rephrases the question as, what is the fixed amount that each painter charges? So, first question to help us answer this would be, how much money does Joe make for 0 hours worked? Because if we're comparing the amount that they make for 0 hours, let's look at one at a time. We can see that Joe earns $60 for 0 hours worked. So Joe earns $60 for 0 hours worked. And Brandon makes $75 for 0 hours worked. Okay. Now that part, I don't think it's too difficult. I think we probably understand at least that much. That when Joe works 0 hours, the table says that he has $60. And when Brandon works 0 hours, the table says he has $75. The thing that we struggled with a little bit more was why those numbers exist. Why do these painters have money when they have worked 0 hours? Why isn't it zero? Why don't they have $0 if they've only worked for 0 hours? So the next question says, which words in the paragraph tell you why they have money earned for 0 hours worked? Well, let's look back at the paragraph. It says a painter's total earnings from a job include a fixed amount plus an amount based on the number of hours worked. So if we're looking at this first sentence, it says it includes a fixed amount. Their earnings include a fixed amount plus an amount based on the number of hours. Okay. So they include a fixed amount plus an amount based on the hours. What that tells me is that they are charging a certain amount no matter how many hours they work. If you're going to hire them, they're going to charge you a certain amount. It doesn't matter how long that they work for. Then they are charging you additionally for every hour. So these earnings at 0 hours, the 60 and the 75, that's the fixed amount that they charge. That is how much they charge you just to work the job before they've even worked any hours. So those are the fixed amounts. So the words in the paragraph that tell you why they have money for 0 hours is the fixed amount. They both charge a fixed amount before they start working. Okay. So in question A asks us, Joe and Brandon make different amounts of money for 0 hours worked. Why? Or rephrased it as, what is the fixed amount that each painter charges? Joe charges a $60 fixed amount and Brandon charges, let me go back up to where I was. Brandon charges a $75 fixed amount. Okay, so that is the answer to question A. Joe charges a $60 fixed amount, and Brandon charges a $75 fixed amount. Now, once you have this answer filled in from question A, right, this is question A, go down to question A on the second part. Question A, looks like the letters got messed up, but this would be question A right here. And answer it the same way. So here we said that Joe charges a $60 fixed amount and Brandon charges a $75 fixed amount. We can put that same answer. We can put that same answer down here for question A. Maybe. There we go. Put that same question over here. or same answer down here. And that's what we're going to do as we go through this review, is once you have the answer up towards the top, go down to the end, and you can put the same answer down there. Okay. So that is all we need to do for part A. For question B, it asks, how much are Joe's earnings? So let's look at the question that we're going for eventually. We're looking now at question B, which says, which painter has earned more money per hour? So the key words here are per hour. Which painter earns more per hour? And then explain the reasoning. Well, I had several people that gave me the amount that they earn at each step in the table, so each row. We'd say, see how far up these go in each table. However, in this table, the hours are not going up by 1. This table is not showing you how much they earn per hour. This one's showing you how much they earn per every 3 hours, not for every 1 hour. So we needed to find out how much they're earning for every 1 hour. Now to start, we can look at how much is it increasing in this table. So when it does increase from one row to the next row in the table, we can find that by doing, for Joe, we could do 175.50 minus 60. So we could do 175.50 minus 60. And that would give us 115.50. So 115.50 is how much it increases from one step to the next for Joe. For Brandon, we can do the same thing. We could do 186.75 minus 75. So 186.75 minus 75. And that would give us 111.75. That's how much Brandon earns from one row in the table to the next. But again, this is not going to tell us how much Joe and Brandon earn per hour, because the table is not increasing by 1 hour. It's increasing by 3 hours. So Joe's hours and Brandon's hours are both increasing by 3 hours. So in order to find how much they make per 1 hour, we need to divide how much they're earning divided by how many hours. So if Joe earns $115.50 in 3 hours, we can divide 115.5 divided by 3, and that would tell me that he makes $38.50 for 1 hour. And the same thing with Brandon. If he makes $111.75 over 3 hours, we can divide 111.75 divided by 3, and we get that Brandon earns $37.25 per hour. So if Joe earns $38.50 per hour and Brandon earns $37.25 per hour, then Joe earns more per hour. He earns $38.50 per hour. And Brandon only earns $37.25 per hour. So that is the answer to question B. And once again, once you have that written down, you should just take this answer and write the same thing down on the second part. Down on question B, which again, this would be question B here. This would be question B. But Joe earns more per hour. He earns $38.50 per hour, and Brandon only earns $37.25 per hour. Okay, we have one more part for this particular question, which is part C. And part C asks us to write a function for each painter to represent their total earnings and define the variables. So for each painter, we need to write a function, and the functions look like this: y equals mx plus b. And these questions up above will help us walk through that process of finding the function. So first off, it asks us, what are the x values in the table? Well, the x values are going to be what's on the left side here for the table. So that is the number of hours worked, is the x values. X is the number of hours worked. X is the number of hours worked. For the y values, that's going to be the other side of the table. So for the y values up here, these are the total earnings. The y values will be the total earnings. Okay, so we know that much. Then it asks, how much does Joe make per hour? Well, we already found that, actually. This same question, we found that Joe makes $38.50 per hour. We already found that up here. Joe makes $38.50 per hour. And then same thing with Brandon. We've already found that Brandon makes $37.25 per hour. So then it asks us, which part of the function do their earnings per hour represent? Either y, m, x, or b. Well, we already know that x represents the number of hours worked, so it's not going to be x. We know that y represents their total earnings, so it's not going to be y. Let's look at m and b. M is the slope, which is also known as the rate of change. And B is the starting point, or I'm just going to put start, but B is the starting point. So if we're looking at their earnings per hour, $38.50 and $37.25, I need to consider, is that how much their amount is changing by, or is that what they started with? Is it how much they're earning every hour, which is changing the amount that they're making, or is it the amount of money that they started making? And for this one, if they're earning it per hour, every hour they're going to be earning that much, that is how much it's going to be changing by. So that's going to be m. That'll be their slope. It's the amount that their earnings is changing by. Then it asks, what is Joe's fixed amount and what is Brandon's fixed amount? Well, we are also already found that. We said up here that Joe, on part A, Joe charges a $60 fixed amount and Brandon charges a $75 fixed amount. So Joe charges a $60 fixed amount, and Brandon charges a $75 fixed amount. And we need to say which part of the function does that represent. Well, again, we already know that x is the number of hours worked. We know that y is the total earnings. We just said that m is how much they earn per hour. So b has to be what this 60 and 75 represent. And that makes sense too, because B is supposed to be the starting point. So their fixed amount, the amount that they charge you before they start working, that's their starting point. And that makes sense. So we can put all this information together to make a function for Joe and Brandon. For Joe, our function would be y equals, our m for Joe is $38.50. Here's our m, $38.50, x, plus our starting amount for Joe would be b, and that's $60. So for Joe, his function would be y equals $38.50 plus $60, or y equals $38.50, x plus 60. For Brandon, we're going to have y equals, Brandon's slope, or his earnings per hour, is $37.25. We should have y equals $37.25x, plus his starting amount is $75, so we'll do plus 75. These are the two functions, one for Joe and one for Brandon. The thing to note here is you're only going to have numbers for m and b. y and x will stay the same. So both of them will have y equals a number times x plus a number, y equals a number times x plus a number. Y and x will just stay y and x, m and b will become those numbers. The last thing it asks us to do is to define our variables. So that's when we need to say, what do x, y, m, and b represent? I have to put it over here because I don't have room to do it vertically. But we've already said all of these things. We said up at the top that the x values are the number of hours worked. The number of hours worked. We said that y is the total earnings. Our m, if we look up at this section, our m, we said, is how much they make per hour, or that would be their earnings per hour. The m is the earnings per hour. And b is their fixed amount. So once again, that is all that we need to do for part C. So we can take this answer and we're going to bring it down to the bottom. Put it right here. And there we go. We got our two functions and we have our defining of our variables. So this is everything that you need for question 1 on this retake.